Suspicious injuries. Dr. Frederick Jaffe was hired by the Connelly family to evaluate the autopsy photographs and forensic evidence. Dr. Jaffe was chief of pathology in Toronto for 30 years and had 50 years of forensic experience as a pathologist. Dr. Jaffe numbered the suspicious head injuries 1 to 5. Here's what he said in his investigation. 4 head injuries, 2, 3, and 4, appear to have been blunt force injuries. Their discrete nature suggests 3 separate impacts, possibly sustained at the same time. Of particular interest is injury number 2, which shows 3 fine parallel lines, possibly reflecting the object which caused it. A microscopic section showed no embedded foreign material in the wounds. Dr. Jaffe also documented a large area of fragmentation on the back right side of John's skull. When discussing the skull fracture, Dr. Jaffe stated, "Its presence introduces further uncertainty into the circumstances surrounding the event. Its presence may clearly have to be taken into consideration in any attempted reconstruction of this event." Why were the suspicious injuries never discussed by the coroner in his investigative statement? After all, these injuries were first identified by the Connelly family in the morgue on the night of John's death. Both the coroner and the police were told the injuries were suspicious because John had been found flat on his back, face up, and wearing a toque. The following day, the police changed the information, and they stated that they were no longer sure if John had been found flat on his back and face up and wearing a toque. And they produced an identification photograph which showed that the skin covering the bruises had been scraped off. In other words, the injuries we had observed only hours before in the morgue had been changed. The coroner and the police now stated that the 4 head injuries were abrasions caused by the fall, and that John had no longer been found on his back, but was on his side. No forensic autopsy was done, and John was buried. The identification and preservation of all physical injuries sustained by John was not possible because the Office of the Chief Coroner delayed the required exhumation and autopsy for 5 months. This resulted in decomposition and the formation of mold, which compromised the results of the autopsy. Had the autopsy been delayed even for a few more days, all of the physical evidence would have been lost. The Office of the Chief Coroner had allowed the wounds we had observed in the morgue to be changed. No investigation of this was done. The remaining evidence was compromised by delaying the exhumation and forensic autopsy. The coroner's investigative statement never reported how John had been found, flat on his back, face up, wearing a toque. This information was verified in the paramedic ambulance call report and in the police notes. The coroner refused to confirm the existence of the skull fracture by doing a second exhumation and autopsy. The coroner refused to report the suspicious 4 head injuries were free from foreign material as found in the microscopic examination of tissue samples. It would appear that anything that made the 4 head injuries suspicious was omitted from the coroner's investigative statement. Why? The Office of the Chief Coroner had allowed the wounds we had observed in the morgue to be changed. No investigation of this allegation was carried out. The coroner refused to release the surveillance video, and the coroner refused to release the sign-in list from the morgue.